I guess we can start. It's 22 now.
Yeah, we can start.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So thank you everyone for taking your valuable time out and joining us for this another phenomenal session hosted by Elite CISOs in collaboration with Akamai. And since it's at 12, so a very good morning or good afternoon wherever you are joining from. And before I actually, hand over the baton to Rupesh from Akamai to take this session forward and share the technology insights with respect to the threat intel briefing on apps and the APIs, let me take a few minutes, and really it will be few, just giving you a brief overview of the Elite CISOs platform. So a quick one. So basically, this was founded nearly like I think 18 to 20 months ago by, and it's truly for the CISOs and by the CISOs, wherein as you can see on my screen, that it's a community of the CISOs and CIOs of leading cybersecurity functions in their organization. So to be very clear, we don't invite any vendors or the OEMs in our core groups. It's purely technological discussions that happen over here in this forum. And as I was saying, so it founded nearly 18, 20 months ago. And if you see here from the governing body team, this was founded by four intellectuals from the industry: Anuprita, Vikas Arora, Rishi, and Fal, who founded this forum. And then they basically this kept on increasing. Basically, now we have our local chapters in different cities in India, and one of the international chapter in Dubai. And we are also expanding our wings more internationally. So very soon we will see a lot over here. So we have the chapter leads for all the locations, and you can browse through more. Now, from the events perspective and from the past and the upcoming, so let me give you a brief overview. So over the past few months, or I would say now years, that we have done a lot of events, and especially during this lockdown when people thought, oh, what will we doing, how will we spend our time and all that stuff. So if you see that we have done like webinars with Qualys, a cyber leadership talk with Dr. Ardal, who is based out in I think Dubai in the Middle East, then Netscope, then the Akamai, then the and one of the key was with the founder of the Zero Trust. So thanks again to our co-founders for arranging this. Very tough to get his time, but yes. And then we have CrowdStrike, who is one of our major sponsors, who conducts not only from the technology side, but from the fitness side also, that we do a lot of interactions with them. And I'll come on to the fitness aspect also a bit later. So this is all about the past. And if we look at the upcoming events, basically, so one is the Akamai that we are having it today, about to start in like 2 minutes. I won't take more than that. Rupesh is waiting. And the next one basically is on the 9th of July, again, 11 a.m. is with Force Point. Now, apart from the events, it's more about the trainings, and trainings we primarily call them as the workshops that we do. And again, during this lockdown, again, when people were thinking what to do and what not to do, I think Elite CISO Forum took a step ahead, and I think we conducted, I think more than, Vikas can correct me if I'm wrong, I think nearly about 5 or 6 workshops, which were all weekend workshops that happened. And you can see the subjects like cyber risk management, Indian IT Act, then we did the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act from an India perspective, then the PCI DSS. And these were all as I can say, all are like hands-on workshops. So people are interacting with industry-led trainers. For example, for the PDPA and the Indian IT Act, we can say, and you can go ahead and look at our post on the LinkedIn. It was Professor Navi, who is like in himself, he is an institution from the cyber law, so who was delivering these sessions. And from the upcoming ones, again, the one is the CISSP, which starts this weekend again, this no, next weekend, I would say, 11th of July. So unfortunately, the registrations for this is closed because we are full with the batch. And another one, which is on the 11th, again, that's for 2 weekends starting on the cybersecurity regulatory. So we encourage you to go ahead and register. The fee for the members is like INR 999, which is very reasonable. And for the non-members, again, it's again 2,000 rupees only. And the membership again is like super easy. You can just go on the website, click on the membership link, and fill in this form, and then we add you to the respective chapters in the cities. Again, we want to make it very clear: membership is only for the corporate CISOs, CIOs, and other cybersecurity leadership roles. So we don't want to mess up our groups with with everyone joining it, and then we get nothing out of it. So that's the basic purpose of the group. And then last but not the least, we are involved in a lot of social initiatives like CSR for kids and all. And out of this, I always, my favorite one is the CISO fitness. So we are always like buried under the work, and we have to like tackle our end users as well as our stakeholders, be it the CEOs, the CXOs, or the board. But yes, I think this fitness regime that is being running with the elite CISOs is phenomenal. Again, we have a separate fitness group, and we have our own blogs, on videos that we keep on posting over here, that what we do and what we not. More than welcome to join this fitness group. And sorry, the last one, which we started like a couple of months ago, are the podcast that we do with our industry standard leaders from the CIO communities and the CISOs communities. And this is being again led by Vikas, who talks about on the different subjects like the cloud security, insider, the endpoint protection, and all, and with good focus on the women leadership also. So the crux is basically we encourage you to join our Elite CISO forum by filling this membership form, and we will take it forward from there. Well, I hope my few minutes are over, and I won't take much time and hand it over to Rupesh from here. Rupesh, I'm just stopping my screen and giving you the controls.
Great. Thanks, Alok. And thanks, Vikas and the Elite CISO community for having us back here again. So the topic that we have for you all today is as vanilla as it can get, if I may call it that way. But even plain vanilla ice cream, though on the surface has absolutely no character, there's no doubt that it has a massive fan following. I, for one, am a big vanilla ice cream fan. Now, when you connect this metaphor to security and to the topic itself that we have today, applications and APIs, though plain vanilla, continue to be amongst the most preferred targets by threat actors, right? And in fact, when we pitched this topic to Vikas for the session during the planning phase, we were also glad to know in a way that this was also top priority for the community. Now, to make the session more insightful, just like the previous one on Zero Trust, we've pulled new data from our globally distributed edge platform and are bringing to you a perspective of the form of a checklist that could help you in the next evolution of your applications and API protection strategy. So with that, I'd like to invite my colleagues, Asim Ahmed, Senior Security Product Manager for Akamai in Asia Pacific, and Arvind Ganeshan, Solutions Engineering Leader for Akamai in India, who are here to take you through today's session. Over to you, Asim and Arvind.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupesh. And hello to everyone. I am going to share my screen, and just a thumbs up if you guys can see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So again, first of all, thank you for the Elite CISO groups for having us here. Pretty exciting for us to dwell back into something which is a little bit more, regularly talked about. Yeah, we obviously look at apps and API protection, at least with Akamai on a very close, from a very close lens. A little bit about me. My name is Arvind. I've been with Akamai a little over 8 years, and in my capacity, I predominantly lead, solutions engineering for a lot of our customers across the web, financial services, banking, PubSec, and enterprise division. And a lot of that would involve defining the strategy for a lot of customers on how best they can work towards securing their, their digital assets. And yeah, I've certainly enjoyed this role, and I'm excited to be talking a little bit about our perspective on what we see with apps and APIs within this community. Asim?
Thank you, Arvind. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making time for this webinar with us. My name is Asim. I work as a senior product manager for Akamai in Asia Pacific region. Like Arvind handles the solution engineering aspect of the business, I handle the product aspect of the business, which involves working with multiple customers from different industry segments like financial services, ITES, business services, a lot of them, including governments. a part of my role deals with understanding the API ecosystem for customers and how industries are leveraging APIs, and providing some sort of thought leadership, and as well the solution sketch for how does one go about protecting their APIs. So in today's session, we're going to be talking a little more about that. Arvind, why don't you walk us through what we have in store today?
Sure. Okay. So great. Thanks for the introduction, Asim. So look, I'll kickstart by mentioning this, that I think all of us would agree that the whole paradigm in the world has changed massively in the last, 2 or 3 months, the way we look at it, and multiple reasons, right? Clearly, we're in a different world altogether with the COVID, the pandemic happening. We're also seeing how the different ecosystems are adopting. We ourselves are undergoing a massive change in the way we interact with this ecosystem, whether in a personal or a professional capacity. And I think that's also a reflection of how a lot of the organizations, whatever industries that they represent, they are kind of coping up with what they need to do from their perspective of enriching the digital experience, ensuring the business goes on, but at the same time also focus on how do they ensure to deliver that experience without compromising the security. One of the key things that we've definitely seen over the last 2 or 3 months is there's been this massive shift in just the whole security landscape. Come to think of it, when you look at about a quarter or 2 quarters back, you would say that the typical security landscape was dominated, let's say, by DDoS, application layer attacks. But what, by virtue of us managing here at Akamai, we're also seeing is that there is a new trend that we are observing within the spectrum of attacks as well. From targeted phishing attacks to ransomware attacks, unprecedented DDoS attacks, which is hurting a lot of the critical infrastructures around the world. So Asim, I want to kind of bring your perspective, from given that you have a very good APAC perspective of the business. As a security practitioner, can you delve into some of these trends that are changing, and what's the perspective that you're observing on that?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Arvind, and I think most of us are going through this phase right now, which is, we all, for the first time in our lives, are working from home in this capacity. We haven't worked, like almost all of us, being in front of computers. The devices that we used to take to office, our official devices, now are being used in maybe not so secure environment, which is our home, right? And also the same devices are being used to conduct a little more personal work, like online shopping transactions, rightly so, because this is the situation that we are all living in, right? So attackers are not unaware of this. This is how they shift their attack strategies, and what we've seen in our platform pretty much resonates what we are seeing in the pandemic situation, right? Starting from DDoS attacks, in last 3 months or so, we've seen 3 significant attacks. Now, you can imagine from our perspective across the year, we see different attacks. Specifically, DDoS attacks are extremely common on our platform and against our customers. And from that virtue, it hasn't changed much. DDoS, from the frequency perspective, remains more or less the same. However, what we see are some interesting techniques being used in the DDoS attacks, including the latest one, which is the massive packet per second attack that we've seen. Credential abuse is where you see most of the attackers now shifting their mind, because this is more targeted attacks and more valuable, right? The credentials of the users is a big market for many out there, and specifically on the dark web. The attackers purchase these credentials and then they try to do malicious transaction, as an example. Phishing is growing. We've seen an uptick in phishing attacks, specifically when the COVID situation and the country started getting into a lockdown mode. This is where we see the old phishing kits being recirculated, which shows that more and more focus is now given to target new users from the phishing attacks. malware, continues to be more rampant now because most of us are working from home now. Attackers understand it. They know that the devices that we are going to be operating and the environment in which we are operating the devices now maybe is not as secure than it used to be a few months back. And specifically the web attacks, right? Because most of us now reliant on the internet more than the ever, right? Whether it's grocery shopping or for us entertainment, because of the prevalent situation we have at hand, we see an uptick in web attacks too. So that's kind of summary of what we are seeing during COVID-19, as more and more organizations, now pay attention to bare fundamentals of security because they need to make sure that their remote workers are able to work, their VPN access is given on time, there is policy enforcement done for the apps. Somewhere down the line, the core security principles have taken a backseat.
Interesting. And I know we'll probably do a little bit about the DDoS in a bit, but one of the things that caught my attention is obviously around the phishing, the skimming attacks, and uh, I must add that I'm sure a lot of us are probably spending a lot more by virtue of the pandemic and the resulting situation to be spending more online time in shopping and shopping, not just from a perspective of a personal preference. It's just that's probably the most safer way to do it. We're getting almost all our needs fulfilled by the online experience. And I do want to get your opinion on what are some of the newer vectors that we're seeing with respect to, let's say, a card skimming, a mage kind of a scenario, which becomes an even more possibility as the days evolve.
Sure. I mean, phishing is one very significant problem right now. Ever since most of the countries went down in the lockdown mode from March onwards, we've seen uptick in the phishing attacks, which typically means that attackers know most of us will be working from home now, may not have access to the secure systems to our corporate networks, and we see more and more domains which are phishing related now. The threat research team from Akamai uncovered, based on our analysis, we were seeing more than 9,000 daily, the domain, 9,000 domains daily that were getting out on the internet using COVID related themes. So keywords like masks example, keyword like PPE kit as an example, right? Those were the things that were used to lure the victims, because it's a panic situation. Most of people are wanting to know more information about COVID. They want to know the strategies to prevent COVID, uh, and so on. And hence, the backdrop of COVID is certainly very new for the attackers, and they're utilizing it and exploiting it in various ways, including phishing. Virus-related domains are growing significantly on daily basis as well. We see more and more malware being served, and these are typically again on the backdrop of COVID, because many people specifically may not be very familiar with the cyber hygiene, fall victim of just clicking on things that might just appeal to them from the very perspective of the pandemic that we are in. We also, as I mentioned earlier, seeing the recycled phishing kits. Typically, without pandemic, it's difficult to see the phishing kits being reused over and over. The reason being, there are vendors and OEMs out there who will create certain signatures or patterns and try to, block that. And hence we see phishing kits typically, the malicious actors will not rotate that. But during pandemic, unusual thing that comes out is, the phishing kits are being recycled because the attackers want to go fast. They want to attack as much as they can at this point of time. The newer thing that we're seeing though is the uptick in web skimming attacks, and these are typically like a JavaScript based web skimming attacks, mesh card attacks, popularly called as, because most of us are today relying on online transactions, mostly e-commerce, to fulfill our shopping needs, not able to step out much. The attackers definitely know this trend, and hence they you know create an impact, or they uh, hack either the sites directly or their third party ecosystem and implant a malicious JavaScript that can fetch user information like credit card details, payment information, and even credentials from the payment checkout pages or e-commerce carts, as an example.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one, because when I look at the whole MageCart scenario, and given that we work with a lot of customers who have a lot of these third-party ecosystems integrated, which use extensive JavaScripts, one of the questions that we often ask, and we're beginning to pose to them, and they are also asking us, is, hey, is there a way we can identify potential threats that these third-party JavaScripts are going to be used? Because as someone who's developing a website, as someone who's developing a business and delivering it online, you will have to work on the whole supply chain, which gets these third-party JavaScripts, the partners that you integrate, and you don't know what they're exposed to, right? You don't know where they are hosted. You might look at all of them to be trustable, but how do you know whether they are eventually not skimming out some information? So that's a pretty interesting conversation. And currently, the visibility that a lot of them are looking to have is very limited. There is always the angle of, hey, how do I know a certain JavaScript has been breached, and what potential risk that that it poses to my organization or users who will be transacting on my information, be it as you said, credit card information, PII data. So that's an interesting observation. I do want to kind of go back to one of the very prominent vectors that you mentioned earlier, right, which is DDoS. Now, we obviously are, we're obviously seeing the fact that, hey, DDoS attack vectors have massively increased. Fundamentally, we know that DDoS attack vectors are aimed at primarily getting down the entire infrastructure. When you look at the history of DDoS, you would have heard terms like MBPS, GBPS, which is kind of reflecting the whole ideology on what DDoS is intended to do. I do want to give an analogy to, and I'm sure, Asim, you will probably do the technical side of it, but to the larger audience, I really want you guys to understand that there's the aspect of the capacity and there's the aspect of compute. When you look at the capacity aspect of a DDoS attack, think about when you go to a large supermarket, you've got these 10 sale counters through which you can fill your trolley and check out and go back. Imagine, a big supermarket opens and you have, let's say large adults, hundreds of them who flock in, and they're basically loading their cart to the brim. And it's a massive sort of impact on the services. There'll be downtime, slowness, etc., etc. That sort of gives you a perspective on what the GBPS or the attack aspect is. But when you look at MPPS, and I'm sure you'll probably hear a little bit more on the technical side, the same scenario now is, imagine now in the same scenario, you're sending small kids who are 6-7 years old and giving them, hey, here's a 10 rupees and go and get, let's say, a 5-star or a candy. But the payload is not high. They just want to flock it just because the volume of packets is quite massive, and that again results in a huge a bottleneck, right? So fundamentally, they're both doing the same thing. It's just that when you look at the way they can be orchestrated, that's a little different. But Asim, we've seen some of the largest PPS attacks in the recent past. I want to bring in your thought from that perspective to see how different and how evolved has that been.
Yeah, so first of all, great analogy. Given the situation that we are in right now, supermarket seems to be the right theme. So you're absolutely right. There is a difference in the way packet per second attacks are carried out and megabit per second or gigabit per second attacks are carried out, right? The difference is that the techniques are different, right? Ultimately, you're trying to create an impact on the application so that the users are not able to get access to it, right? Bring a downtime to a business. However, while most of us today look at volumetric attacks and are prepared for that, have bigger links or pipes, internet pipes, right? That's what the volumetric attacks like gigabit per second, megabit per second, or terabit per second does. The high packet per second attacks are typically targeted for bringing down the mitigations organizations have in place. And this is where you're talking about your firewalls, your routers, because, as right now, imagine you're looking at, as in this example that you have on the screen now, more than 800 million packets per second. This is equivalent to possibly more than tens or 50 firewalls together, trying to, stop the attack. The processing capacity of the the gears that we have in our data centers today, will just go down with this. And attackers use this technique mostly to attack the mitigation that is in place, so that they are able to carry forward either more sophisticated attacks or just completely get away with the mitigation and focus on the core crux, which is to bring down the application and the APIs, as an example.
Great. Yeah. And look, I think the fundamentally when we look at, as I said, DDoS, right? I still believe they will continue to evolve as this whole situation evolves. In fact, one of the key things that we've observed is purely from a perspective of the different verticals that keep getting targeted. The moment you say DDoS, right, a lot of the notion was that, hey, DDoS is predominantly targeted at FSI, banks, public sector for multiple reasons. And clearly, the impact of a large scale DDoS economically, brand wise, is much more impactful in these industries. But we're also seeing with this ecosystem that we're now adapting ourselves to, that's changing itself, because as you can clearly see, what we are observing also on the Akamai platform is, yes, the traditional the industries that are attacked continue to exist, but you clearly see that there's a massive shift happening towards the internet, the telco space, infrastructure hosting providers, gaming. Obviously, I mean, we're seeing a massive uptick in gaming being consumed by virtue of the pandemic. Education systems, right? I know there's a lot of focus on e-learning system, delivery of online education, online classes, business services who are now adapting to the whole work from home ecosystem, and they being targeted to massive DDoS infrastructure attacks. So it is quite clear that when we look at the whole attack, the vector surface from an industry perspective, that's evolving. And we might see this sort of evolving even into a perspective that, hey, DDoS fundamentally is an umbrella under which you try and sneak in a lot of web application, because the ultimate damage that an organization can have is by virtue of losing that data. And very often we find ourselves that the DDoS is just an umbrella under which the actual exploit happens by accessing the apps or the API. And that's where we look at what the trends are also shaping up, right? And this is quite an interesting infographic, Asim.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, couldn't agree more with you, Arvind. Often or not, we see that DDoS attacks are just distractors, right? Um, Things like, for example, the attack we spoke about, right? More than 800 million packet per second. Uh, One, the intent of the attackers is to bring down the mitigation infrastructure in place. It could be your firewalls, it could be your um, other IPS, IDS devices, an example. But at the same time, it is a distractor because your teams are quite busy handling that, right? Application and other downtime that comes with it. And for the attackers, they try to sneak through that. And hence we see a significant uptick in application attacks as well, right? During this year itself, we've seen uh, the growth of more than 40%, as compared to the previous years on web application attacks. And just to bear in mind, we're only half across the year so far, right? We continue to see industries like financial services, commerce, high tech being top target. But there are other emerging verticals like education, as you mentioned, government services. Those are pretty much there. Telco providers, example as well. Now, what's a bit alarming is that this is the attacks that we see on the web application sides are continuing from the trend from last few years, and they don't seem to die down. So SQL injection attack, as an example, still continues to be the top uh, attack that we see on the platform, and most likely the reason being the poor development practices on the databases. More than that, most of the organizations today still continue to use relational databases, which are prone to SQL injection attacks in some way. And hence, the SQL injection is, and also there are plenty of tools available, practically very easy to exploit. Just just without having a deep understanding of how SQL injection works, one can download a tool, just put a host name and start executing different attacks, right? Then we see local file inclusion being the second popular attack, because that's where you can play around with the server directory or execute malicious files on that. The API attacks are growing significantly as well. We see APIs getting targeted 4 times more than the traditional web applications or websites. That's a significant uptick that we've seen on the platform. I think from your perspective, Arvind, you could maybe share some of what you're seeing from the field.
Yeah. Um, Look, I think quite an interesting one in relation to the graph that we're talking about, Riyad. Clearly, there's a massive uptick in web attacks in general, and what we are observing is the web attacks are now more targeted towards API and exposed APIs, identifying potential vulnerabilities. In fact, one of the largest retailers or e-tailers, you can call them, probably a name that everyone would resonate with in this country. We recently worked with them for a massive kind of a sale or an event where we were primarily working towards ensuring how do we ensure the broad spectrum of APIs, the endpoints are getting protected in the best possible manner, because fundamentally the amount of data that can be exfiltrated from the API endpoints is massive. Think about a login endpoint. Think about an endpoint that helps generate an OTP. Think about an endpoint which will actually complete the credit card transaction. And most of it we're clearly seeing are APIs that are being delivered either on a native app, on a mobile, or typically a web app. But and these endpoints, they're not necessarily going to be prone. I mean, yeah, they will be prone to a large scale DDoS attack, because if you can bring the endpoint down, then nothing goes through. But they can also be prone to massive the slow and low attacks, because they often will be targeted. I mean, these attacks on the surface just look like a normal request, but I think you need sophisticated techniques from identifying are these humans, or are these orchestrated requests like a bot, to say, hey, what essentially are they going to exfiltrate from the endpoint. Fundamentally, that's kind of giving us a very good insight from the customers that we work with, because the whole API ecosystem is changing very, very rapidly. When you look at the way organizations used to design their website or their ecosystem about, let's say, 10 or 15 years back, APIs are definitely now at the heart of the entire connected ecosystem. So much so that that's the only way information exchange is being handled in a very agile manner. So make no mistake, the API explosion that we're talking about is real, and there's no slowing down to it. In fact, one of the Gartner studies that I was reading earlier as well, which says that, look, there will be a point in time, Gartner did in fact 2 studies. One was they were just trying to survey a lot of organizations across different industry verticals about what's the API adoption that they have seen. What they are clearly seeing is almost 73% of the organizations are in that API journey, where they've built these API ecosystems to allow for data consumption. And while the remaining are deliberating on how they can get onto that API ecosystem journey, which also means that APIs fundamentally, if you look at it, they just make the whole process of information exchange, the interoperability, how let's say an organization can give data to its internal ecosystem, whether you're building an internal API, or how do you ensure that the same data who needs to be accessed by partners, by third-party vendors. Typical cases like if you're an insurance provider, if you're an e-commerce company, if you're, let's say, a financial services company who wants to provide stockbroking services, right? You still need to give APIs. So they are obviously evaluating, hey, what kind of APIs need to be exposed? And while they're definitely looking at the ease of use angle to make sure the experience is a lot more, there is always the angle that as this paradigm evolves, more and more services, more and more business are driving the growth and the need for APIs. So Aseem, from a new business perspective, what is it that you see which APIs are fueling new business growth?
I mean, one primary thing for APIs is it fuels innovation, right? Most of us know today that we are able to have that seamless experience on the app that we use because of APIs really helping it out in the backend. Now, give you an example. Today, you use Uber, you book it, um, you book the app, you take an Uber, uh, the location that you're trying to find from the maps, there is a map API specifically, right? Think of it few years down the line, pretty much anybody that depends on the map will mostly be using Google Map APIs, right? If the organizations have to build their own API ecosystem around the maps, just to curate the maps and understand how the navigation works, they're going to be spending potentially millions of dollars at that scale. And hence, APIs bring new business models that can be used by different organizations, right? Today, you think about wearable devices, IoTs as an example. Um, all of that is getting interconnected. My watch with my shoes, capturing how fast I'm running, or my watch capturing how fast I'm running on the treadmill, talking to the GPS system on my phone. All of that is made possible using API communication. So, so there are different services that we can think of today, that are getting very, very customer centric, and brings new revenue models for the organizations.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a very important point that you mentioned, because the way in which businesses are attracting, they interact and serve with customers has obviously changed profoundly, right? Yeah, I mean, there was a point in time when you had these dedicated brick and mortar channels. They have given way to a combination of like a discrete legacy channel, which is now augmented by websites, apps, and that's continuously evolving. And the whole amalgamation of the physical and the digital to get that connected, cohesive experience is being fundamentally fulfilled by APIs. So much so that it's not just helped enable get that experience, but also part in software ecosystem which spans billions of users, not just users but billions of devices as well. Because with the popularity of APIs, as you rightly said, there are IoT devices, there are there are these devices. Fundamentally, any device that you think has a network interface card is a device that can potentially use an API. What we are also seeing is that as the businesses continue to rely on these digital connections, and the point of interaction becomes a massive source of influence for the business leverage, they are also beginning to be a massive source of risk as well, because APIs are so vast and diverse that think about, as you said, every device is now a potential attack vector, and thereby the proliferation of these devices makes it all the more difficult for us to all the more difficult for us to say, hey, look, how does this fit into the fact that my API ecosystem to manage security can be managed in a very cohesive manner? How do I ensure that I as an organization can manage the needs of making sure security does not become too rigid in the way it is, but the experience is not compromised on? So that's it. I think what I want to hear is, what are the different what are the different attack vectors we are seeing as on the APIs today? We know there is obviously a lot to do with not just the devices, but different ways APIs can be exploited. And I have a perspective with a kind of a very good example that we had one of the famous bloggers in this space. I'm sure a lot of the people here know Troy Hunt. I'd like to share that example right at the end once Asim, you finish the divulging into the attack surface. But Asim, your thoughts on the different attack surface and how they can be exploited.
Sure. So think of API ecosystem today. APIs can be accessed by your mobile browser, mobile app, or desktop browser, as an example, right? And the attackers will come either of these ways, either using mobile browser or mobile app or desktop, right? Um, so the first thing that the attackers want to look at is how vulnerable are your APIs against authentication attacks. This is where we're talking about hijacking user sessions, looking at session vulnerabilities, cookie stealing, or more sophisticated attacks like credential stuffing, right? Where we have these data breaches, which leaks millions or maybe even billions of username and username and passwords. Attackers get hold of it, right? And they start putting that into the different botnet systems and start targeting your login endpoints to see if there's a match of credentials. So a brute force attack now being done at the scale of huge botnets, sending a large pool of requests your way, which is, you know, very different from the traditional volumetric attacks. The other aspect where we see, the API attacks is the volumetric DDoS, and these are typically where we see a huge surge of requests just targeting your API endpoints. So if your API endpoints are as in login or maybe a gift card or maybe a checkout as an example, all of those functions are handled by the different APIs and microservices. Um, a huge surge of these DDoS or volumetric attacks can create an impact on that. Moving to the more sophisticated attacks, which are actually very closer to the application stack on the API server, those are uh, different, right? APIs are to be treated differently as compared to the normal web applications that the organizations have. This is a key thing to keep in mind, right? APIs bring some inherent security problems. Things like parser-based attacks. Each API will have to parse the JSON XML content to look at the nested structures that come in. There are ways using which the attackers can target the parsers and create something we called as deserialization attacks, right? Um, that can even help attackers execute a remote code on your application. Then there are other vulnerabilities like OWASP top 10 based, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting. All of those continue um, pretty much will impact APIs in the same way. The other thing which is API specific is application based DOS on APIs. And this is where uh, the very nature of APIs makes it possible for the attackers to execute it. Today, if you look at the API schema, these are deeply nested structures and are often vulnerable depending on how you have created the logic in the application. The attackers can find a flaw where they can input a deeply nested structure and create something we call as hash collision attacks. The hash collision attacks need not be large in number, but can significantly impact your application performance on the API server to a point whether it's just rendered unusable for the users. So that's kind of a broad theme of the different things that we see on the API attack surface. You wanted to add something, Arvind? Arvind, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, my bad. The authentication one strikes a very important note there, because very often we say authentication and authorization, right? And we take it for granted, like it's a very basic thing. But I want to highlight kind of why that's a very, very important aspect to be considered when you're implementing a strong API strategy from a security perspective, and how if you have an API call without proper authentication, authorization, or even session tracking, can actually allow attackers to take prohibited actions on behalf of someone else. So the classic example, which probably happened around 2016, 2017, one of the famous automobile manufacturers, and to my earlier point about how Troy Hunt discovered this, it's a great example of how if you ignore authentication authorization, that would just put your entire sort of ecosystem at risk. What researchers actually found that there was an API in this case which could be exploited to control the vehicle features, because the app wasn't authenticating users. Now, it was basically using the vehicle's VIN number. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with VIN numbers and what that means. But the VIN number was one of the key things which was designed within the API as a construct or a schema, and say how you could control the car rather than a typical username or password, which was the most obvious way of authentication or authorization. So the attacker could basically cycle through the VIN numbers, activate, deactivate a bunch of things on the car, like air conditioning, heating, battery usage, so on and so forth. And there was a second failure when you submitted that VIN number. You could also associate the user ID to the VIN number, which is essentially you could get entire details about the person by virtue of that VIN number itself. So thereby, you're looking at a scenario of a data breach, in itself. So fundamentally, when you look at it, we've obviously talked about the attack surface. We've talked about some of the basic things like authentication, volumetric DDoS. It just seems to me, Aseem, that hey, this would clearly indicate that API security, while you rightly said, you cannot look at API security in the traditional way how you look at web application security. There are a bunch of things you need to keep in mind when you're designing for a strong API ecosystem, right? And I'm sure some of this is with the API governance part, some of this is with How do you ensure strong authentication authorization? What are some of the key things? And I'm sure at some point your traditional WAF can also play a part. But can you talk a little bit in depth about what the current gaps are and how do they stack up against some of the traditional measures that have existed?
Sure. So APIs, unfortunately, for long have been ignored, by most of the industries. We think of them as the functionality driven, which they are, but the security comes much later for APIs, and this has been a problem for long. Uh, Most of the organizations today use traditional measures like just thinking using the SSL or TLS is enough, right? The encryption plays part there. Maybe they have some sort of rate throttling. We're looking at IP-based rate controls as an example. Maybe they are using firewalls or application firewalls that are signature-based, which leads to a couple of issues: either performance impact or as well as creates false positives, because not every firewall can intercept API schema uh, in a right way, right? You need the right parsing, you need the right understanding of the schema itself. And then we have these access control measures, typically looking at either HTTP based authentication or maybe using the legacy Java web based tokens as an example. Those are traditional measures today. You definitely need those, but what you need are much more evolved thinking in how you want to handle your API security. So API testing still fails for most of the organization, right? The continuous way to look at, or the code reviews or the audits are on the APIs does not happen the way it happens for the rest of the applications. API governance is an issue. That's where the key use of API gateways comes in, right? Access authorization all becomes a part of API governance. Getting to know your API ecosystem becomes a part of API governance, right? And one of the key things that we often see organizations struggle with is they do not anticipate what sort of scale they need, right? And hence, we see many organizations rolling out API services and then have to quickly roll back in because they didn't have sufficient scale to handle their APIs, right? And that's where I believe cloud has fundamentally kind of come forward and try to solve those problems. And application security strategy for API still continue to be a big gap. The focus approach of using multi-layered security for APIs also needs to be evolving now. So use of positive security, negative security models, use of API governance in conjunction with app security has to come through. And these are the top gaps that we see in the organizations today.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you mentioned. Organizations don't have a very strong inventory, if you will, right, of all the APIs that are currently available, whether it's internal or external. Last year there was this interesting, I'm sure this is widely publicized because one of the top classifieds in India, they faced a massive breach. About close to about 100 million users' data was published online. And fundamentally, when you think of it, eventually what turned out was they were using a lot of these legacy APIs, which were never looked upon from a security angle of governance, access control, or even making sure that they have the right kind of authentication and authorization happening. So it's quite interesting. You say that you have to blend in and make sure you not just have the visibility, but you're also looking at ensuring that these gaps don't exist. You don't have legacy APIs, and you're having a very strong positive security model across all these APIs. That sort of brings me to a very interesting part about, hey, look, organizations have these challenges, and on the face of it, this makes me believe that achieving the fine balance between, again, the whole managing the entire security ecosystem is not easy, right? On one hand, you've got the whole conversation about business versus security angle. I highlighted about the fact that asset classification, that becomes a very important aspect because one of the Gartner surveys also highlighted the fact that typically there are like different use cases of an API. There are internal APIs. Look, almost 1/3 of the APIs never get exposed publicly outside the organization. Out of the ones that do get exposed, some are available for public consumption. Others are restricted only for certain partners or certain vendors, and the third could be an entirely other interdependent dependency business function, which is what the APIs are supposed to function. But Aseem, why is it just so difficult to have a strong API security strategy?
I mean, you actually answered the whole thing. Now, just to recap, one of the key thing is APIs are still looked as just the pure business functions, right? This needs agility, this needs innovation, you need service stability, and businesses typically look at rolling out quicker services as fast as they can, right? Based on the industry that they are in, and hence security is usually an afterthought, specifically on the APIs. The asset classification is a bigger issue today, and has been for some time now. Most of the organizations don't know how many APIs they have, right? Uh, Developers come and go. APIs are created, some of them not exposed, some of them never ever make it to the API register, right? Right, and hence it is trivial for organizations to even know. Uh, and the bigger risk is because of all of this, we often under evaluate our API ecosystem and the risk that brings along with that. Many of us cannot understand or simply quantify if an API endpoint comes down, what sort of impact it will have on microservices, maybe several microservices running behind that. And that's why it's become very difficult, Arvind.
Yeah, and look, when you think of it, everyone's adapting to this whole ecosystem. One of the fundamental things that I've often observed with a lot of our customers when we speak to them is they might not say this in public, but make no mistakes, a lot of times that they've had a breach with some of their APIs is they come to know about it much later, in once it's been published in a forum, in a dark web, or some researcher points it out. And that's probably the bigger part of the problem, is they just don't have a solid visibility that, look, there is a breach happening. It's massive, and yet the implications of what that breach means for them is a very significant aspect. And one of the customers that I was speaking to said, look, our fundamental problem, we understand, is while we work on the ecosystem to strengthen our security strategy, we still don't know that in any organization what the impact is from an API breach or a data breach or a web application attack, which brings down their infrastructure. But what are some of the other entities within APAC, Aseem, that you think they talk about in the whole impact of a large-scale attack on either on the web app or the API side?
Yeah, I mean, we did a study as Akamai. We did a study with Ponemon Institute, to understand from the CISOs and the security leadership community about the impact that these attacks can have, right? And based on the different surveys that we did, we found that web application attacks actually contribute to a greater revenue risk as well. And that's where we see it could cost easily up to in excess of $2 million per breach or attack that happens, right? And it's not just the data that is costly, but it's also the whole ecosystem that has to change in terms of bringing more on the mitigation side, in terms of looking at the indirect losses because of revenue, or your brand name reputation that goes down. So that could significantly contribute. And the average downtime in most of the cases, let's say in a bigger DDoS attack, could even be 8 hours. That's quite significant for the organizations to handle.
Yeah, and look, I think that's the core of it, is the impact of this is such that, as you rightly said, because the APIs or because the applications are doing such a very important aspect of, you accessing your financial information, you accessing your banking services, you accessing your, let's say your OTA, travel, retail, or even commerce, any amount of downtime which sort of makes a negative impact on the user experience is just unacceptable for business. And when I say business, obviously, people who actually control on the user experience and the monetization aspect, which is why it becomes very important for us to understand, hey, look, Any organization which is looking at making sure these are strong points need to look at a certain checklist. How do you protect, how do you discover, how do you analyze the ecosystem? So fundamentally, when you look at the whole, the checklist that organization should follow, discover, I think making sure that you have an absolute visibility of your entire API ecosystem, right? Knowing who is designing what APIs, having an inventory of making sure that APIs, internal or external facing, is solid. um, I can't stress enough on having a very strong, robust testing strategy, because every API that gets designed, and I'm sure developers keep creating a lot of these APIs, needs to undergo its own rigorous checks, regression testing, and make sure that you're subjecting it to the most stringent of web application attacks from a penetration testing perspective. So those checks at an app level, at your security perimeter level, has to be very strongly implemented. Yes, and a fallback mechanism should always be a part of the design. Asim, what about protect and analyze? How do you see that to be a major checklist which organizations implement?
Yeah, so from the protection perspective, as I explained earlier, you definitely need some of the measures that we discussed earlier: encryption, rate-based throttling, web application firewalls to protect against signature-based. That's all part and parcel of the security strategy. But on top of which, organizations needs to pay a lot more attention towards protecting user identities. That's where we see most of credential stuffing attacks happening on APIs now, right? API specific DOS should not be confused with the typical DDoS that you see on the application layer. And hence, you need robust mechanisms to limit your access to the APIs, and specifically the volumetric attacks, right? The other aspect is to bring in positive security strategy model, which is looking at defining the API request constraint or API schema on something on your firewall or cloud services, so therein the attackers are not able to pass any malicious payload other than what is expected of the application. And the final piece of advice on the protection side is to make sure that you use API governance, things like access control, authorization, API key lifecycle management. All of that has to be balanced with the other aspects to make sure. And finally, API has to become an integral part of your risk assessment, which needs to be continuous. You need to think about scaling APIs for peaks and attacks both, and that's where cloud becomes such an important part today.
Yeah, and look, in I think sort of rounding that up really well. I will mention this to the audience here that look, apps and APIs will as they continue to evolve in proliferation, popularity, make no mistake that they will continuously be subject to the best attacks from a application perspective, right? We talked about this in our one of the slides earlier, but even when you're designing the applications, when you're designing your API ecosystem, there will be vulnerabilities that you may not be aware of, which will reveal that these are security measures that need to be plugged in. You can call it the 0 day or call it anything, but those are vulnerabilities that exist at a code base, and you will need a certain way to address that through implementation of a security system. Not knowing your API ecosystem, it's almost like you have a blindfold and you're not sure whom you need to protect with a bunch of people behind you. So yeah, know your API ecosystem, maintain your inventory very, very clearly. And then final piece in the whole management is a lot of APIs, a lot of implementations are looking to ensure while you're getting the best experience, there is an aspect of management, there is an aspect of monetization, but make sure you have your firewall in place to protect this ecosystem. And more importantly, you need to ensure what's the robust security mechanism that you can put in place to protect your identity, because at the fundamental, at the core of all these is the fact that there is an element of identity which cannot be compromised. And yeah, look, this is not a one-stop shop thing. It's not like, hey, I do it once and forget about it. Evolution of just way SecOps or DevSecOps works, that needs to be incorporated when you're designing your ecosystem. So a continuous CI/CD approach on the DevSecOps on API security will always lead to better results. So Asim, with that, to this audience, let's just say, what is the three things that you would say they should be looking to do over the next few days in terms of understanding their API security strategy?
Yeah, so my suggestion to everyone is, as you mentioned, and we can't stress enough, take time for APIs, treat them as your first class citizens, because they are that important. So you should be looking at in next 30 days or so, access your, understand your API ecosystem better, understand which of the APIs may not be a part of an inventory, which of them get published, and do you get notified about that, right? In next three months or so, you should look at, you know, the consumers of APIs, who are accessing your APIs and from where, and then define the approach of protecting the APIs. And finally, I'm sure as you go through this exercise, you'll learn that not everything may be handled by you at your parameter data center because of the very nature of the API ecosystem and the threats that are evolving. And hence, if you want to choose a specific partner to partner with to protect you from the API threats, do that in next 4 months or so. That's an important part, and create a project for API security, and make it as a part of your top strategy for this year and the coming year. That's
Sure.
my advice.
Thank you, Aseem. And look, I think that's pretty much what we had to at least talk about to the audience. I'm sure there's probably a bunch of questions. I don't know if we have time for handling a couple of them. So maybe I'll hand it over to Rupesh now, and check if there are any questions that we can take.
Sure. Here's one. How do you see security paradigm in open banking API, which is now predominant and exposed to various e-commerce platforms?
Yeah, I can take that one. It is a very interesting era that we are living in, and specifically with open banking. It does pose a lot of security challenges, and that's where the standardization of certain either regulatory laws or regulatory regulations or frameworks will help. So if you talk about Europe as an example, they have their own framework of protecting the open APIs, which they are mandating for banks, fintech providers, integrating with other channel providers like e-commerce as an example. There has to be a continuous approach, going back to something that we discussed earlier, is to discover, protect, and analyze. That should not change irrespective of which industry you are in. So with open APIs, user privacy and identity becomes even more critical for the organizations to protect. And hence, things like the technology evolving around user behavior analysis, identity and access control and management plays an important role. API security measures that we just spoke about are going to play a significant role in the overall evolution of open banking to come.
Yep. Cool. Here's the next one. Do you follow a detective or a preventive mode of analysis and discovery?
It's both. I mean, from the perspective of security, it always have to be multi-layered, and it has to be a combination of both proactive and reactive. Reactive when the attackers land your doorstep, and proactive is how difficult you make it for them to even enter your doorstep. And that's where I sincerely believe things like edge platforms or cloud platforms are going to play a significant role in the security strategy, because you are able to proactively handle the attacks much before the attacks even reach out to your data centers today. So it has to be a combination of both.
Yeah, I might just add there that, look, that fundamentally for me is looking at it in a positive and a negative model. With a negative model, you're doing everything that your security systems are supposed to do. Your signature-based detection, some of the things that would normally capture web application attack. But with the positive model, to Aseem, what he's saying, you're basically defining what is allowed and what is not allowed. So much so that you go to the fine granularities of defining the API endpoint on a certain ecosystem or an edge platform. You define what are the schemas that are acceptable. What's the integer? What's the maximum length of that integer that you can accept. So that means you're taking it one step further, because you know your API ecosystem really well for you to be able to define that. So then it just means that you have a fairly robust, and yes, look, there is going to be a practice of making sure your backend teams who manage the API, for example, the API keys, you follow the best practices, because that cannot be managed really well with any appliance, any software, or any platform. there is also an element of best practices that you need to ensure outside of the ecosystem as well.
Hey, Rupesh,
Hey,
thank you
Rupesh,
so much.
next round of question, I think we need to reply over email because we are running out of time. So you want to do a closing note, Rupesh, and then I'll spin the wheel.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, Aseem, Arvind, Alok, and Vikas. Now, as we close, I hope the session was as interesting as it can get. Now, to gauge that, the QR code that you see on the screen will lead you to a feedback form. Now, your feedback form will help us to get a better understanding of your security requirements if you plan to, if you're planning for something in the future, and also to improve our content for our next few sessions. Now, the folks who complete the form will enter a lucky draw, and 25 winners will win an Amazon gift voucher. Now, we encourage you to take that short 1-minute survey, and with that, I pass it on back to you, Vikas.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to share my screen now, and let me know, guys, when you see it.
Yeah,
because we can see it.
So, perfect. So this is just a wheel of fortune. I'm going to spin it. All the people who registered, they are part of this list, and this will spin and it will pick one person, and that one lucky person will get a Amazon Alexa. And you have to be present over here to win this Alexa. And members of Elite CISO are not eligible. So Alok and Rishi, you are not eligible for the win if your name comes up. Okay. So I'm going to spin it, and then if you're present, if your name is there, put it in the chat that you are available here. Okay, guys. So I'm spinning it now.